Domestic terrorism is on the rise across the country.
The plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer is the latest in a string of crimes all tied to an anti-government movement.
Cabin investigator Heather Catallo takes a deeper look into what these groups are really all about.
This movement has a really weird name, the Boogaloo. But don't let that fool you. Experts say this movement is downright dangerous. Violence is on the rise across the U.S. from far-right extremist groups.
This is not a militia. It is a domestic terror organization. We need to call it out.
Law enforcement officials say the 13 men arrested as part of the plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer and attack the state capitol have ties to something called the Boogaloo movement.
It is primarily an anti-government movement that wants to incite violence at these protests we've seen recently. It wants to, engage in violent acts and bring about the collapse of society.
John Lewis researches extremism at George Washington University.
It's a fragmented, disparate set of individuals. Anyone can join. I can go put on a Hawaiian shirt in my closet and say I'm a member of the Boogaloo movement.
The term Boogaloo comes from the 1984 movie Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. Lewis says it roughly translates into a bad sequel, snowballing on the dark web into a term for a second civil war.
What that became 6 to 10 months ago was it started developing a more offline identity, which is important. So it moved from that online meme-based 4chan space to offline at protests with the Hawaiian shirt and the plate armor and the AR-15.
Law enforcement sources say 11 of the 13 men are associated with a militia group called the Wolverine Watchmen. Michigan has a long history with militias. But sources tell the 7 investigators that other legal militia groups consider the 13 suspects as very much on the fringe.
So the Boogaloo threat is in ways separate and distinct, but I think what we're seeing now in the United States under this broader umbrella of what I call far-right terrorism, you've got different strands. You've got sort of militia groups, you've got Boogaloo, you've got white supremacists, you've got neo-Nazis, and sometimes they stay in their own worlds or their own lanes, and sometimes they cross over.
Javed Ali spent 16 years in counterterrorism and intelligence in the federal government and was on President Trump's National Security Council until 2018. He says the current political climate is prompting more extremist groups to act out.
It's the pandemic, it's the protests, and it's politics.
You may have noticed these suspects are not charged by the feds with domestic terrorism. That's because there is no law for that, and experts say there really needs to be some better policy to help with cases like this. I'm Heather Catallo, 7 Action News.